Thank you. And thanks everyone for sticking it out till Saturday evening. Okay, so I am the director of Healthy Reefs for Healthy People, and this is our workspace, the Mesoamerican Reef. It's the Northwestern Caribbean, including Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras. Amazing reef systems, coastal wetlands, and watersheds. From the beginning of this concept of the eco-regional work, we have included the land and thought about the land's impact on the sea. This is where the story begins for me. This Mesoamerican reef story began 10,000 years ago with sea level rise and the flooding of the shelf that allowed the reef to begin to grow. But for me, 1990 was the point when I began to have my relationship with the reef. I was a bright-eyed and very optimistic Peace Corps volunteer that went down to Belize and was put to work here in the Ho-Chan Marine Reserve. This place is phenomenal. It's 1 square mile, so we're going to grow in our size of conservation. But right now we're starting with a 1 square mile piece of reef real estate, fully protected from fishing, and with an amazing abundance of fish. So other communities in Belize started coming to this park and saying, hey, we want a Ho-Chan, and that's what they called it. Ho-Chan means little channel in Mayan. So they recognized it was a small space, but it had amazing large benefits and a roll-on, spin-out effect. Within a few years, we began to have a full network of marine protected areas in Belize. And then that also, we began to think about coastal zone management and the whole impact that the reef was having on the economy. This is not a hard sell to people that live and breathe and work in Mesoamerica. They live in close contact with the reef. They know it's valuable. But in 2008, it was actually quantified by WRI, and that helps our case. It builds the background support for why you need reef conservation. One of the things that we began to see as the reef became more popular and tourism became more popular down in the region is a little more impacts. So we began to notice that, well, these impacts are actually larger scale than our rather small, mostly protected areas. Then in 1995, we experienced our very first coral bleaching event. So that was appalling and scary because we didn't actually know what was going on. I had a dial-up internet connection that I used to try to find out some information. And it was really amazing, you know, how little we knew at that time, at least in Belize. No one had experienced it before. So we survived that one. We managed to pull a group together very quickly, went out and did assessments and found out that, you know, only about, well, 40% of the reef had bleached, but very little died. We said, this is okay. Our reef is healthy. It's good. We're going on. 1998 comes. That was the worst bleaching event yet. And that resulted in a little more mortality, and also it was concurrent with a Category 5 hurricane. Our reef got beaten up. So now we're seriously worried and thinking, okay, it's going to come back because it's healthy. But is it healthy? How do we know? How do you measure that? And was there consensus, back to that idea of common voice? That was the birth of the Healthy Reefs Initiative. It was that simple question, how do you define a healthy reef? How do you measure it? And we spent 2 years developing a whole book that outlines and details the indicators of reef health and actually gives the metrics quantities. Like, this is what we would hope to achieve in a reasonable time period. Threshold values of what we consider good and poor. And those values we are able to use in this report card system. We've now done 4 of these report cards on the health of the Mesoamerican reef. Very easy to understand. They actually are targeted towards decision makers and general public. It's the same level, right? That's all I'm saying. So the same, that very easy to understand, breaking science down into categories and colors and doing maps, and we have actually graded it. That was a difficult accomplishment, I think, to get scientists on board to agree that we can grade the reef with categories. And that's based on, you know, a lot of science, but in the end it comes down to what you need to do. Scientists need to break it down for the managers and the policymakers. After we had done the second report card, we realized each of these report cards gives you the status of the reef at that point in time, but it also puts forth recommendations that were developed by the collaborative group that did the report card. The recommendations for, you know, what can you do to improve reef health. So then we realized, well, we're going to keep making these recommendations, and we're not really evaluating whether that is being implemented. We're evaluating the reef, but we're not knowing which ones of those recommendations. So we developed something called the eco audit. If you can see very much of that, the MAR overall has a score of 62 now. So it's 62% of the things that have been recommended, it's 62% to completion. So each one has like a five-point grading scale for how complete it is. You can be partially complete along that trajectory. Some things we're doing well, like research and monitoring. We like to do that. We're doing a good job at that. MPAs we're doing pretty well. Sewage and sanitation, for some reason, no one wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I don't know why, A few other, private sector is not doing as much as it should in the region, but since the economy is really based on the reef, it's very important. But this is the group of people that are working on it. So the conservation collaboration that Healthy Reefs has managed to pull together grew from the initial point of doing that book that kind of defined everything and got everyone with a common vision. It was 4 organizations. Now it's 66 organizations in the Mesoamerican Reef. All of the marine protected areas managers, which are often small NGOs, are the ones that are largely in that logo bank, plus the government departments that are in charge of managing reefs. So we've got all the key players together. We come together once a year for a meeting, and that's really important. We've had a lot of fun and gotten in the water and counted a lot of fish, 267,000. This is just from our database. The report cards are built on the database that Healthy Reefs maintains, and we have it open access to all the partners and others. But partners also contribute data, so we've actually counted more fish than that because we don't have all their totals in this. Next, I'm going to tell you about the actual conservation successes we've had. So through this partnership, we evaluate the successes, but the partners themselves are doing really great work, and our initiative is helping support that, and we are sharing the information to make these success stories roll out a little faster throughout the whole region. This success is in Belize, and the name of the organization is Fragments of Hope. So you can see that the idea of telling hopeful stories has really taken on, and they understand it and believe it. This little group has planted out fragments, little corals. This is Acropora cervicornis, an endangered species. So we're bringing back this endangered species from the brink. Over 90,000 just in the southern Belize region. 90,000 corals have been planted. This is over 10 years. And she's measured a 35% increase in coral cover in that area. So other groups in Mexico and Guatemala are also now doing coral nurseries and coral transplanting, and even doing sexual reproduction of corals in their labs and then transplanting them out. So we've got a real focus on restoration, and those groups are sharing information and helping bring back endangered corals. Through the process of developing the Healthy Reefs book, we stress the fact that both structure and function of the ecosystem need to be intact in order for you to call it healthy. So herbivory is one of the critical functions on a coral reef, and one of the functions that we think is the most in most decline right now due to overfishing. So these parrotfish had not traditionally been fished in the region, but as we fished down the food chain and took most of the snappers and groupers, these began to become a target. And so in the 2008, that was the first report card, we actually recommended, and scientists had recommended from the Coral Reef Symposium, we should protect parrotfish. And Belize actually did it in 2009, Guatemala did it in 2015, Honduras did it in 2010, in the whole Bay Islands, and we've now measured, and Mexico, we're working on it. We haven't given up. We're going to get it in the Mesoamerican region of Mexico. And we actually measure an increase in parrotfish biomass over this time through the monitoring. So that's a win. We haven't yet controlled our macroalgae, but we've got a lot of bites on the reef, so I think it will happen. The other thing we've been working on a lot is the marine protected areas. That was kind of back to the beginning of the story, but they've been increasing, and we've realized it's not just protection, you've got to actually do that no-take. So we have measured through the evaluation process more fish. So actually that more fish, and within the no-take zones of the marine reserves, we've got about 10 times the biomass. We also used our network 2 years ago when we got the predictions of this major coral bleaching event. Because we had everyone organized and in the same space, we could quickly go out and assess for the coral bleaching, and we did that. And so we counted these, 34,000 corals over the 2 year periods during the bleaching season. and found out that our region was luckily not that severely affected by the coral bleaching. So, this can change from one event to the other, but the fact that we had the network ready for like an emergency response, we could get out there and quickly do it, we think that is one of the major successes. One of the other benefits of being out on the reef and doing these monitoring expeditions, and actually one of our reefs was discovered through a training expedition where they just went out into a new reef area, is beautiful new reefs that we didn't know exist and are not on the maps. So like the Millennium Coral Reef Ecosystem maps, they don't have any maps in Guatemala. This reef is in Honduras, and it's right by the airport. It's called Banco Cordelia. It's got the highest coral cover in the Caribbean. It's like 62% living coral cover, largely that endangered cervicornis, right by the port and the airport. There's the cruise ships coming in and out, and it's really odd. The other discovered reef in Honduras was off of Tela Bay. It's a deep reef, so you don't see it from the satellite images, and it's got almost 60% live coral cover of Agaricea. It's these phenomenal things, and I think it's the unknown. We don't know why these coral reefs are so good in these unusual locations, close to the mainland shore and this Tela Bay. The water is not even clear. Why are these corals doing so well? That's part of the fun, and I think the joy of nature is not knowing exactly, we don't have all the answers, and that helps us keep going, and it actually fuels optimism. But in the end, I think what we're really after is getting people hooked and getting them involved. This was no, I won't call it a stunt. This was an activity we did to get people out on the reef and get this wonderful photo before the COP10 that was in Cancun. So we sent this image to Cancun. We also did another one that was not optimistic. It was called The End. It said The End, and it had a question mark, like, will we see the end of coral reefs? But we felt no, so we did a nice, harmony, positive image on a beautiful reef, and it took the collection of all the people working together to spell this out and make this diagram. And we've been in the water collecting the data for 10 years now. We have an open access database. I invite you all to please like our Healthy Reefs for Healthy People Facebook site and follow us on social media. And we're really trying to roll this out now to the wider Caribbean. We think we've had a number of other places have been interested in doing report cards, and it's just about a lot more than just the report cards. We need the data, we need the framework, the common vision, but getting everyone together is what's really given us the best benefit. Thank you.